What's up, YouTube? So you want to be a code reviewer? All right, there's an implementation of a certain methods. We look at refactoring that. I'm going to actually do the refactoring now, and I'm going to explain my thought process and reasoning for all of that. It's sort of on the method design aspect. All right? Okay, let's do that. Come on. Okay, so we have the publisher base class. If you remember this one over here, the disposable thing, it's got this stuff. I've refactored all of the stuff to include the execution context of all the methods, so there's not breaking it down. The monitor ID, orchestration ID, all that. It's all now execution context. And I have this implementation here for the publisher, which is using the RabbitMQ, is doing the RabbitMQ publishing. It descends from publisher base and it's RabbitMQ publisher. I'm going to focus your attention on the one part. Well, let's look at that. The connection. Where's the connection being used? It needs to be disposed. That's good, because typically when you have connections in TCP, keep in mind, if depending on how the class is being used, right, you don't want to have to keep creating instances of that expensive stuff, especially TCP connections. So that's what I would look for. For anything that's TCP related, like HTTP client, make sure you don't create a new instance each time. Maintain that instance as a member of your class. All right, so that's good. What about this topic exchange? Where is it being used? There. Okay, multiple places. Look at that. There's looking like a lot of common, all similar code here. Okay, let's examine that. All right, so there's a dispose. This is the correct way to dispose. Even if it's in the same class, you'll have a dispose method. That's the method from the iDisposable pattern that in turn calls this method dispose with the bool, and the dispose method will be implemented like this. So it'll call the one with the true, and then it says gc.suppress finalize this. And in the descendant, this is the way to implement. There's a disposing and there's a disposed. If it is being disposed and the class has never been disposed before, then do your thing and just make sure you set the disposed to true before you exit, right? So, and then all the things that need to be disposed are here. And of course, here again, if it's not null, only then can you call this stuff, right? We have these three methods here: publish core, publish exception, and publish monitor start finish. Look at that, start finish, not start end. Okay, cool. You can see this commonality here, something like that. Okay, isn't a channel disposable? I don't know, let's see. Is the channel disposable? That's what I do. How do I know if I should be disposing? Yes, it's disposable. Oh, it is disposable. It's being used in the using. My question would be, why do you need to use this channel or create a channel each time? Why can't you reuse the channel? So that's one issue, where the channel is being recreated each time. This channel should probably be created at the time of the connection, and then it should be disposed of here instead of doing this over and over, right? Now, depending on the SDK, like this is the RabbitMQ SDK, you may or may not know what the implications are. You might have to read up some things, but the thing is, you should recommend it. You may not know. Maybe you should find out before you recommend it. But typically, I mean, I know the RabbitMQ thing, so I can just say, just do it like this. If you don't know, recommend and say, please go and look this up. Look it up at the documentation in order to figure out if that's a bad or a good thing. So don't be on the other side, on the developer side, don't be afraid to look at the documentation. Question it yourself, right? The series says, so you want to be a code reviewer, is all about making you all about making you a better coder, not necessarily a code reviewer, but a better coder, so that you can eventually get there. Which means as the one doing the coding, you should have these questions yourself. Because if I have the questions, you miss them, right? Unless you have the answer right off the bat. So yeah, fix that to have it as a member of the class. So you do that over here. Let's do that. Well, I'll save you the time because we want to do some of the refactoring. Then if you look at this, basically all of this code is common. Nothing seems to be changing here, right? And here. Okay, so this is what I would suggest, first of all. Don't try and do this refactor in the very first step. Okay, I've got this rule of thirds. That's a very important rule because it gives you the opportunity to not commit before even starting. You write this one method once, let's say, and you write this once, and you get this working. Then you start writing the next method and you start doing the same thing. You probably even copy pasted this from the previous method. You say, I could just make a method. I'm saying don't refactor right off the bat. It's important to let the code kind of play out 3 times. And when you get to the 3rd time, you're saying, oh, okay, I've done this for the 3rd time now. Maybe I should think about what I'm doing. Because when you get the 3rd time, right, maybe there's a difference. Maybe there's some sort of variation to that. You've not yet committed, and you have the option to now dream up whatever implementation you want without wondering or without being committed to this one thing. In the first go, it went like this, and all of the methods from this point forward are going to use this refactored thing like that. And it's unfortunate that if you went down that path right from the beginning, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to have a better understanding of the code and therefore then create that refactoring or do the refactoring after you've seen all the different variations. So personally, I would say just don't bother trying to refactor as you're writing the code. Write the code, get to work. Write 3 times, try it 4 times. And once you see all of the variations, then go back and refactor. Right? But at the same time, what I would suggest is when you write this code this first time, 2nd time, don't copy paste it. Just write it again. Maybe you arrive at a different, conclusion the way you implement this part here. It's not a copy paste of that, but slightly differently done. And the same thing for the 3rd one. Don't copy paste it. Write it different. Write it again by yourself. And maybe you'll arrive at a different result here. All right. First of all, I would say essentially that this is being repeated multiple times. Without even thinking, I would say, okay, that's being reused here and here and here. This needs to be a constant. Anytime a string is being used more than once, the same string, it should be a constant. Now, it could be a member constant if it's being used across methods, or a local method constant if it's being used multiple times in the same method only and nowhere else. But if it's being used more than once, make it a constant. Just no thought process. So as I'm going through the code, let's say, I see this over here. Without trying to look at the refactoring, I'm saying, okay, now I see that over here. Okay, immediately I write a comment saying, make that a local member constant. Same with these, right? The create date, message type, create date, message type. And then of course I'm suddenly going to think, oh wow, this looks like all the same, and I might change my recommendation after the fact. But that right off the bat, I'm going to look for that string and say, okay, is this being used more than one time in this code? Yes, make it a constant. Is it being used more than once in this method? Yes, make it a constant. Okay, so we can see that this code is common. This code is common. Hang on. Actually, it's all this code that's common. Seems to be like all of this is common, is it not? All of this is common. Okay, so let's refactor it. Step 1, define a method. You tell me, should it be public? Should it be protected? Should it be private? Should it be either of those and static or not static? You tell me. Private static, good. Somebody's learning. Private static. And at this point, it's returning void. I don't know what it's going to do. And it's going to have some method name. Actually, it won't be returning void because, I don't know. What's it doing after that? Oh, so it should be getting properties. What are these properties are? Basic properties. Okay. Even this I would change. This is another thing I talk about, in my programming intent. These should be var, right? This dictionary, use var when you can. What does that mean? var is type inference. The compiler infers the type. The compiler is way smarter than you and me. So it can infer the type, irrespective of what the name of the methods are on the right-hand side of the assignment. The compiler can still infer it, right? Because it's seeing the code. The human being may not be able to infer it. So when I say use var when you can, it means as a human, if you can discern from looking at the right-hand side what the variable type is going to be, use var. Okay. Create basic properties. Oh yeah, it's a basic properties, make it a var. That's it. Don't need to think. I can, as a human, can understand that. Similarly, over here, it says new dictionary. What the heck is this going to be on this side? It's going to be a new dictionary, right? Do that. Use var when you can. Same thing with that, right? So make var when you can. Actually, this reminded me of another thing. Where was it? Sorry, I just remembered. I wanted to bring it up, but then I completely forgot. Okay, here. What about this? Do you see a problem here? Take a look. There's the variable name. That's a new instance. Same thing, right? You could say use var when you can. Okay. But there's still a problem. There is still a problem. What's the problem? Exactly. Don't invent names. Don't invent names means many, many things. When you're giving parameter names to a method at the time of designing the method, don't invent the name for the parameter. Give it the name of the type. Most times that just works. Unless it's a businessy thing, there's absolutely no reason to change it. Same thing over here. This is a local variable. Why is this called puppeteer monitor message? It's a monitor message. Give it the same name. Don't invent names. And that's what I would say. Don't invent names. So when I'm doing the code review, you just hear me, making those statements like, don't invent names. That implies this sort of thing. Okay, let's go back to the thing here. All right. So, oops, sorry, wrong class, this one. So that's private static void. We're going to get back properties. This for now, I don't know what it is. When I name something initially, I'm just giving it a name. I'm taking like the best shot I can have right now to give it a name. And then as I implement it and start using it, I'll change the name. Right? So I'm never married to my design. That's the key aspect of being a good designer. Never be married to your design. If you are not willing to make a change because you learn something new, because somebody gives you another recommendation, somebody gives you a better idea, a different thought process, you will never be a good designer. You're never going to learn, and you just think your design is the best. You can't be married to your design. You always have to have the option to improve on it or change it or rethink it. Right? So for now, I'm going to call it initialize properties. Initialize publish properties. And what are we going to get here as method arguments? I'm going to copy all of this stuff here and paste it in here. Okay. So it's got these properties. It's got this execution context or orchestration ID. So, okay, let's just do this first of all. This is an I model. It's called connection. I would call it I model again, but because this is called an I model, this is create model, but then we call it channel. So this is really a channel in RabbitMQ. It's returns a fresh channel. I don't know why they call it model. So I'm going to call this channel though, because this has more meaning. Even though I'm inventing a name, for whatever reason, the RabbitMQ people just give it the wrong name. If I called it model, it's just going to be confusing. So I'm going to call it channel. Okay. And then there's the execution context. You see, it helps me with the names. I don't have to worry about that. That's why I said don't invent names. Just use what the ID is providing there. All right. What else? So this is going to have to be something like that, right? It doesn't? Okay. What is that? Chi connection. Okay. Okay, that makes better sense. message type. Message type. That's that message type. Okay. Cool. All right. Seems pretty simple. Something's wrong with this. What's wrong with this? It works. This will work, but what's wrong with it? A couple of things. First of all, you want to look at it from the consumer side, as in the thing that's the call side. Whoever's going to use this method. You're always designing things from the way you would like to use them. So you're always thinking about how would I like to use that class? How would I like to use this method? Not when you're implementing the method and deeply embedded in the implementation or the class and you're in the class. You're designing the API of the class by looking from the other side. How would I like to use that class? How would I like to use that method in that class, right? That's how you're looking at things. So, but on this side, do I need this connection? Has quite a few other properties and methods, right? It's got like a whole host of things here you can do with this connection. Is that what you want to give this method? The entire connection? So you can do all these other things with it? I think not. It's creating this model, and this model is an I model. It is an I model. Okay, but it's a connection. I see. So personally, I would say, okay, I need to give this method not a connection, but an I model. I don't want it to have that, but it does need that. Or does it? It probably just needs it doesn't need the channel, because even the channel has, so many other capabilities. I mean, do you seriously want to give this method the ability to do whatever it feels like with a connection or a channel? No. So the rule I have is methods are always given the bare minimum information, nothing more and nothing less. The bare minimum. Need to know basis, I call it. You don't need to know basis, right? So here, instead of asking for a connection or channel, I'm going to ask it for these basic properties. Right, so this will be basic properties. And I'll just call it, should I call it basic properties? Maybe I should call it basic properties. I don't know what that means, but set of properties that are the base properties or the common, should have been called common properties, not basic properties. That's what they really mean by that. So I'm going to take that out. And this basic properties. Okay. And then what I'm returning from this, because that's what they need there, is this basic properties. So I'm going to return the basic properties. And no one could say that you don't have to return anything, but I actually like to do that. So it's very clear that I'm taking the basic properties you gave me, I'm going to modify it, I'm going to return it back to you in some way. Right? Otherwise, you don't know what really happened. So I prefer than doing that, especially when this is a reference type. Basic properties. Okay, so that's at a high level, that's the basic implementation. We're good with that. What about this execution context? It only needs the orchestration ID. Should I be sending it the entire execution context? It's got the execution context with a bunch of other properties. MachineID, very useful properties. No, need to know basis. It doesn't need it, don't give it. Right? Just give it what it needs. So here, then it just needs orchestration ID. All right. And then the message type is message type, which means I can take this focus. If I'm making any typos, I can't read that part of the screen with the lights being so bright. Okay, orchestration ID, good. And everything else looks good. Let's look at it from the other side. So initialize publish properties. I'm return this basic properties. Okay, so let's look at the call side. So I don't need any of this stuff up to here. Let's do that. Initialize publish. Maybe I should call it initialize basic properties, since that they seem to know this term basic. Okay, we'll have to change that. And it's going to need that and that. So this channel is actually going to not be here, right? As we said, the channel actually is going to be a member of the class. So let's do that. So connection, this is what they call iModel. Okay? And then here, create model. What's the thing? Cannot see convert. Oh. Model. Okay. So connection first, channel second, which means here channel should go first and connection should be disposed of last. So you can say channel dispose. I'm guessing there's a channel close also. That's what's going on. Yeah, typically in TCP, I don't know for a fact in Rabbit, TCP related things, close and dispose are one and the same, right? For connections like AD.NET, when you close the connection, it's, well, AD.NET is odd actually. Everything else mostly follows this practice. So like file streams, they follow this practice. And it's a recommendation from the guidelines book. The close, because you typically open and close, no, you don't open and dispose. So when you use terms like open and close, then the close should be doing what dispose also does. So at that point, calling close or dispose doesn't really matter. It's one and the same thing. I don't know for a fact, but so since this code has been written like this, I'll try to do the same thing here. So if, channel, shoot, can hardly see the screen. Channel is not equal to null. Then channel.close. Right? And channel.dispose. Okay. And then of course, once it's dispose equal to true. Okay, so that's that. Which means then when we're calling this from here now for the first time, we don't need to create the channel. So that's out. We have a channel, so we should be able to just say do that. So when we call this method, we should be able to do that with a private member of the channel, right? And then we can provide it with the execution context.orchestration ID and message type execution context dot. Is there a message type? No, where did you get the message type from? Oh, silly me, it got it from there. Okay. So it's got it from there. Message type. Right. This was that method I told said we should refactor where since it's depending on start and finish, the message type is the primary. It governs whether it's a start and a finish, and that's what's going on here. Okay, so that's that, which means all of this code can go in all of the methods. And this channel will then become that, or the properties. Right, so that's what it'll be. So now let's take that and refactor this in all these methods here. And this will be the member. Cool. Oops. Maybe the monitor message has that. And the monitor message has, oh, we lucked out. Okay. Fine. So Now, do we want to change this name? From here, it says initialize basic properties, publish properties, initialize public properties, initialize public properties, given blah, blah, blah. I should give you back a set of published properties that will be published. Okay, I think the name is good. Initialize public properties. Okay, the other refactoring I'm seeing here, so there's a lot of commonality, is this stuff here. This seems to be common. It's not actually common because they're slightly different. Right? This is saying monitor message exception, and same thing here. Like it use var when you can. So yes, here is use var. Over there is not. Don't understand this. Always be consistent. Don't write code just slaps stuff together. At least have a reasoning for why you write code. So it's always going to be consistently wrong or consistently right. When I see code that's sometimes like this and sometimes like that, I just feel like the dev is not either paying attention or doesn't care. I mean, shouldn't you want to be proud of that work that you did, even if it's 2 days of work? Shouldn't you feel like I own that code? That's what the code I wrote, and I thought about it, and I reasoned about it, and this is what I come up with. You need to be proud of what you write, which means you will automatically follow a certain consistency. So you can certainly develop good habits and then follow those. Just don't write code, unnecessarily. So this should have been changed to var. Okay, but other than that, this is working with the monitor message exception. This is working with the monitor message start finish. And this is working with the monitor message. They're all different. Okay, but nonetheless, where did this monitor message come from? Oh, it came from there. Okay, so it's not constructing the message here, it's given. So these lines can be refactored. Okay, so let's refactor that. So this private static is good. It's private and static. Great. Let's look at the next one. So this will be also private static, since all methods in this scenario should start private static. What do they return? They return a byte array. Okay, so you say serialize message. So they're all got some form of message. So this is a generic method which takes a T, where the T is a message. And you could have like a constraint, where T descends from, but we don't have that. Oh, that's the other thing I don't do in my base classes and things, is I don't like DTOs that are immutable. I don't like to use inheritance. I very rarely do I like to use inheritance, right? I'll probably talk about inheritance and some of the problems in another video, but I use inheritance only when I'm using polymorphism. That's it. I never use inheritance otherwise. So DTOs are just DTOs. They each one stands by themselves. They don't typically composite, and they certainly don't inherit, unless there's a justified reason for it. But for the most part, I don't care to inherit from them or descend from them. So there's no need for them to be constrained because they don't descend from anything. All right, and then I can take this here, this code here, do that. Message JSON, this takes a T, and this takes the message, and that returns. Let's say there's 2 lines of code. Oops, return. But then we can actually just use that. So there's 2 lines of code. Message body. We could, I don't mind, leaving this here like that. Didn't seem to say much, barring the one line for here, but it will be clean, as you'll see. You could replace that directly, but it really doesn't matter there in this case. So let's do the same for this, you create the instance, but then these two lines collapse to one line. The reason I prefer to do it like this is only that tomorrow if this serialization changes from JSON to binary, at least it's just one method that needs to be modified. And the knowledge of how you're serializing is confined to this one method. It's not being repeated, in 15 different places in this class. So, all right. So, and so on. Do the same here. In this case, it's not creating that instance, it's just receiving it. All right, so the code has been quite a bit modified, which is good. There's one more last thing that I want to show you. I noticed it in one of the other classes. Let me see if you can figure that out. So if I looked at this base, was it monitor? Or was it actually one of the, let me find it, one of the DTOs. Yes, here. Okay. Simple class, there's something wrong on this line. Do you see it? Pause, and I'll tell you anyways. You can pause and think about it. This is what happens with this. I'll just show you what happens here, right? This is how I would write the code. Publisher base, publisher base. Oops. Wow, that is new one. What what just happened? Okay. Publisher base. Okay, I don't know how it's doing that, but that's what I would use. Right? Don't invent names. Publisher base. But for base classes, I don't have the base keyword because base class implies that any descendant would work. And so at that point, the variable, the member, the parameter, property is called publisher, not publisher base. So this should be changed to publisher. The property is called publisher, which is good, even though the type is publisher base. In this specific case, you are sort of inventing a name, which is, because it's a base type, your property should be void of the base suffix. And so should all parameters here. So that should be what it is. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this thing. I don't know how this works for you, whether you get bored, am I going too slow, do I not explain enough? I really don't know. So if you are enjoying these videos with the code review thing, my reasoning, thought process, whatever it is, if you're learning from these things, please let me know. And I can make more of these videos. So I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I hope you learned a few things. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, and I shall see you next time.